All right, joining us now here on Daybreak this morning, Roy Casagranda, Associate Professor of Government with Austin Community College, also a Middle East Affairs expert for ACC. It's great to have you with us early this morning to talk about this action taking place last night. Okay, the civil war in Syria has been going on for about 6 years now. It's not something that just happened recently. How does this move by President Trump change things as far as the United States' involvement in this civil war?
It depends on what happens next. If this was just a one-time deal, it probably doesn't change much of anything. Sort of a little bit of the background for Idlib is it was held by two organizations, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham and then Ahrar al-Sham, and they were allied with each other until about February, and they actually began fighting each other. So it's really interesting that the Bashar al-Assad government decided to gas the city, if he did it, right? We don't actually have the evidence for it. But they're technically our enemies because they're Salafists, and in fact, what used to be called the Al-Nusra Front is one of those organizations, which was an Al-Qaeda organization. So it's that complexity of Syria where you have ISIL, who's an enemy, Al-Qaeda is there, they're an enemy. The Syrian government, we've never liked them, so are they an enemy? Well, they are now if we're bombing them. If this was just a one-time deal, there's no real impact on Syria and the Syrian government. If it's something like a beginning, then it could be amazing.
I've got to ask you, you said if he did it, do you think there's someone else that could have done that?
I mean, the odds are it was the Syrian government, but we haven't done an investigation. So how do we know? We don't know for sure.
U.S. allies seem to support the action. Russia, Iran, others have come out against it already. How concerned should we be of a retaliation, not just from Syria, but from a place like Russia or Iran, for that matter?
I mean, Russia doing something in the United States, unless it was economic, I can't see there being any kind of military effect. Russia has actually put counter sanctions on us because we've already got counter sanctions or sanctions on them. But the counter sanctions have a very small impact on us. It's hard to imagine Syria doing anything to us. You know, the government is barely holding on to power at some level. I mean, its position has improved over the last year, but it can't control its own country. And Iran is probably in a state of just constant fear that the United States is looking for an excuse to do something to it. So I suspect Iran will behave very well.
So this, in your opinion, isolated is what it is, and the reaction from Syria will determine what the United States does in return?
You know, we don't know because the Trump administration changes what it says from week to week. Trump campaigned saying we should not get more heavily involved in Syria. When he became president, he said we're not going to get more heavily involved in Syria. We actually have because we're increasing our fight against ISIL. And then last week he said that we had taken removing Bashar al-Assad off the table, and now we're saying Bashar al-Assad has to go. And that's within a week span of time. He may have, the president of Syria, may have misunderstood the comment from the Trump administration last week as a green light to do this attack, if he did in fact do this attack. So one of the things that we would need to see happen would be for the Trump administration to actually come up with a coherent Middle East policy and then stick to it, regardless of what direction it goes in.
I've got just a couple of seconds left, but I've got to ask you, Al-Qaeda, you mentioned the Islamic State, now Syrian government. Who's our enemy, or how many enemies maybe do we have in this country, in this region now? Well,
I mean, that's a good question. So, you know, Assad attacks people who we would think of as enemies, then we attack him for attacking them because he attacks civilians in this sort of terroristic way with chemical weapons. Even the rebels who fight for us, some of them are groups that maybe we don't want to prevail in the end. So it's a very complicated situation, and I don't know what the solution is. One of the problems that I think we have here is in 1998, Bill Clinton attacked the Sudan and Afghanistan when he was under a lot of pressure and what appeared to be at some level maybe an act of distraction. And here we have the Trump administration, which is clearly under pressure because of the Russia-Trump campaign scandal. And so another thing that he's going to have to do is think about, you know, who's our ally in Syria, but then how do I convince the American public that this wasn't an act of distraction?
It's a very complicated issue.
Very complicated.
Thank you so much for clearing up a bit of that for us. Roy Casagranda with Austin Community College. Pleasure to have you here this morning.
Thanks for having me.